Hello, it's another beautiful Thursday, and it is your favorite news and current affairs program on television. It's today's review, and I am Ray Osazwa, your host. We've got loads and loads to talk about today, and with me in the studio to talk about some of these amazing things is somebody new. You would find out when we come back from seeing what we've got on our tidbit segment. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Welcome back. Like I said before, I've got someone new on set with me today. I've got the beautiful, beautiful Fiona. Hello, Fiona.
Hello, Ray. Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm happy to be here today.
Okay, we've got lots to talk about, so quickly we'll just get on with it. Now, on every single paper today, we've got a story that's most heart-rendering. Just seeing the pictures on our national newspapers just really breaks your heart to see. Now, it's no other story, you know, but the migrant situation that's been faced, you know, by people from countries such as Syria, Afghanistan, you know, and some other war-torn countries all around the world. It's a terrible situation. But, you know, just like I said, practically every paper today had it. Here I have the Independence News with me, and just there on the front page is the picture of this poor child.
It's horrific. It's very horrible. This is a human being. This is someone's child. It could be anybody's child.
It could be anybody's child. That's what's painful about this. Here on The Guardian, we've got the same picture, you know, just there showing the plight of some of these people in Europe. It's painful. I'm sure you've got that.
It's right here on the Times too, the same picture of a man rescuing the little boy. Actually, the boy is dead, so I wouldn't really call it rescue. I'll call it...
Exactly.
He's just bringing the child out of the water. He's just right there on the shore, and then the man is bringing him out. It's terrible.
It is terrible. It is terrible. It is terrible. Which brings us to, you know, our first story, you know, for the day. It's one titled, "Britain should not take more Middle East refugees," says Cameron. The report says that the Prime Minister, David Cameron, obviously, has maintained hardline position despite pressure for UK to do more to help amid outcry over pictures of drowned refugees. The cry has been on, but with the picture this morning of the child who actually just drowned, trying to get, you know, from one country to another, you know, the outcry is so much more, you know. But clearly David Cameron has continue to defend the fact that the UK's approach to the migration crisis is different. He doesn't want to take the same route as other EU nations have decided to take. According to him, he has actually said, "I don't think there is an answer that can be achieved simply by taking more and more refugees." You know, I don't know what you make of this, but before I even allow you make a comment, we are going to watch, you know, a short clip of the short brief interview with David Cameron, where he actually said the answer to this problem isn't taking more refugees into the UK. I mean, I wouldn't know what the answer to the problem would be, but I guess when we come back from watching the clip, you have a thought or two to share with us. Let's watch that clip.
Well, we're taking action right across the board. We're helping the countries from which these people are coming, stabilising them and trying to make sure that there are worthwhile jobs and stronger economies there. We're obviously taking action at Calais and in terms of the channel, which I've described on previous occasions. There's more that we need to do, and we're working together with our European partners as well. But this is, these are big challenges, but we'll meet them. Well, we have taken a number of genuine asylum seekers from Syrian refugee camps, and we keep that under review. But we think the most important thing is to try to bring peace and stability to that part of the world. I don't think there is an answer that can be achieved simply by taking more and more refugees.
Okay, quickly, you heard what the Prime Minister's just said. He said a couple of things that I would probably talk about as the program goes along. But first of all, I want to believe that, the words migrants and refugees are two separate words. But in this context, sometimes we're not quite sure how the words are being used. So if you could quickly tell us, what are the differences between these two words, migrants, refugees?
Now, the thing is, there's a clear distinction between the word migrant and refugee. Now, a migrant is someone who goes from one place to another just for different reasons, especially economic reasons, to seek for a better life. And then a refugee is someone who is displaced from their country or who leaves their country to another country, so that especially because of conflicts or wars or humanitarian crisis,
terrorism,
so there's a clear distinction between the two, and in this situation the two words are being mixed up. And Yvette Cooper actually said that the UK is treating this problem as a migrant situation.
Which clearly it is not.
It's not an immigration problem. It clearly seems like an asylum problem. And the UK should be able to understand this and open their borders for these asylum seekers.
Amazing. We've got a clip by even Yvette Cooper. But even before we get there, I want to take you back to what the Prime Minister did say. In his interview, he actually mentioned that the UK has done so much to help the situation. I don't quite understand in what area, because just Monday here, the president of the EU was very outspoken about the fact that many nations in the EU have actually turned their backs on this situation, acting as if it's not their business. And the United Kingdom happens to be one of such countries that he was referring to. So when the Prime Minister says the country has done so much in the areas of helping people who are seeking asylum, I don't know if you've got any information as to in what area he has helped.
Now, the real situation is, according to the report, is that Germany has taken in about 800,000 refugees into their country. But compared to that, the UK has taken in about 216 people. Now,
sorry, could you say that again? The UK has taken 216
people so far.
In comparison to Germany, who has taken in
over 800,000 people. Now, the other MPs are saying that if the UK could take in more people instead of just a few hundred that they've taken, it would make the situation easier for the EU. The problem should be shared amongst all the countries, but the UK seems to be, shutting out, and David Cameron clearly maintains a hard stance concerning this. And according to what we just saw, he says he doesn't think that the answer to the problem would be taking in more refugees. But the refugees are out there. The problem is escalating. It's in our face. Yes, and people are dying. These are real people dying.
You see, Cardinal Vincent Nichols, who is the head of the Catholic Church in England and Wales, is actually called Cameron's response to this crisis a total disgrace. In his word, he said that we are letting people die and seeing dead bodies on the benches when together, you know, Europe is such a wealthy place. According to him, he said we should be able to fashion a short-term response, not just a long-term response. In his opinion, Cameron is saying the United Kingdom will send money, you know, to Syria to help, you know, with A and B. But right now, regardless of how much the UK are sent to Syria to help with, you know, food and, you know, welfare situations and stuff like that, the people are there. They're fleeing Syria for reasons that are obvious. You know, it's a war-torn zone. I mean, terrorism is high there, and the people can't stay. So just sending funds to Syria isn't the solution. We need to take some of these people, you know, on board, and that's the ground from where, you know, Yvette Cooper, who happens to be the Shadow Home Secretary and also a Labour leadership candidate, that's where she's coming from. She's actually accused the Prime Minister of turning his back on the worst migration crisis since the Second World War, in a speech which she actually made on the growing refugee crisis on the Centre for European Reforms in London just Tuesday. She, in her speech, has clearly distinguished the issues of asylum from the wider, you know, issue of migration debate. We're going to watch a short clip of her general opinion of this issue of migration and refugees, because clearly it looks like here in the United Kingdom we're shying away from what the true situation is, because clearly what we see going on today is not an issue of migration. People are not trying to come into the UK, or they're not fleeing to Europe because they want economic stability. They are fleeing because there is war where they are, there's terrorism where they are, and their countries have become unbearable for them to live in. Let's watch this short clip by Yvonne Cooper.
So this has become a humanitarian crisis on a scale that we have not seen on our continent and since the Second World War. Yet we seem paralysed to respond, stuck in the troubled politics of immigration when this is about asylum instead. Stuck treating immigration and asylum as the same thing when they're completely different, and we should keep them so. Stuck hiding behind disputes over student visas or illegal working or European agency workers when none of that has anything to do with refugees. And stuck talking only about migrants when we mean fathers, sons, sisters, brothers, daughters, mothers. Stuck too in a political cowardice that assumes that British voters' unease about immigration means they will not forgive anyone who calls for sanctuary, even though our nation has given shelter to the persecuted for centuries, and sometimes moral leadership.
Wow. So one final word before we move on to another topic. What can we do if Cameron continues to insist that this is not necessarily, I mean, letting these people into the United Kingdom is not the solution, then what is the solution?
I believe that joint efforts, you know, amongst all the European Union countries would make the situation lighter and bearable. There are thousands of people fleeing, and the borders need to be open. People need to be taken in. They're seeking asylum. They're seeking safety, and we need to consider these people's plight, because they're real people. It could happen to any country. I mean, if the United Kingdom was suffering a crisis like this, they would want other countries to take them in.
To lend a helping hand.
Do you understand? So I believe that the UK especially...
should be a bit more compassionate.
Exactly, about the situation. So we hope that Cameron actually reconsiders and does something positive.
We hope so. All right, we'll move on now quickly. And quickly, we're going to be looking at the issue of people trafficking, or better still, human trafficking. It's a huge problem all over the world. Just recently, the United States released a report of human trafficking all around the world, and the report did say that we have at least 20 to 36 million slaves in the world. That is a huge figure. But today we are going to be focusing really on the issue of human trafficking here in the UK and in Europe, that's also because of the refugee crisis that's been faced in this part of the world. Because to a large extent, where you have, you know, this sort of situation where there's been war and terrorism, people become prey, really, to human traffickers. People want to get out of whatever situation they find themselves in. So when someone comes to them to say, I can take you, you know, I can help you move from one place to the other, they don't care. They would give anything to allow that happen, not really checking to see if the person taking them has an ulterior motive, you know. So this morning we're looking at 30,000 suspected people traffickers in EU. Now, the Europol says that human trafficking is at a very high level as criminal gangs use social media to exploit refugee crisis, which was, you know, the point we just tried to make. I know you are very passionate about the human trafficking topic. How do you, what's your take on this topic?
I think the numbers are growing continuously every day. At least one person is being trafficked every 30 seconds, and it's escalating, especially because of this migration crisis. It's it makes people very vulnerable, and smugglers and traffickers are taking undue advantage of the situation. I believe that this is the time to even authorities should tighten their forces and take more action to stop this.
Quickly, we're going to watch two clips. The first one of the USA human trafficking report that's been released for 2015, and after that we would watch a short interview by Kevin Hayland, who happens to be the UK Independent Anti-Slavery Commissioner, what he has to say about the figure, you know, that's been released by the by United States, and how that plays out here in the UK. In the UK, we have at least 13,000 victims of human trafficking, and that's a huge figure to deal with. So we're going to watch both clips, and when we come back, we'll talk a bit more about the human trafficking situation here in Europe.
There are between 20 and 36 million slaves in the world today, right now in 2015. And human trafficking generates more than $150 billion in illegal profits each year. The U.S. State Department's annual Trafficking in Persons, or TIP report, rates countries on their efforts to bring those numbers down and to ultimately eradicate modern-day slavery.
This report is important because it really is one of the best means that we have as individuals to speak up for adults and children who lack any effective platform whatsoever through which they are able to speak for themselves.
Yeah, well, that number is obviously truly shocking. And these are people who come from around the globe. They're people who are sometimes duped, promised that they'll earn lots of money, promises that will never actually come to reality. And when they come to the United Kingdom, they're forced into sometimes prostitution, forced labour, or sometimes sent out to commit crime, or even get involved in issues like selling charity bags for gangs who are making millions of pounds that they're then returning to the criminal groups who operate sometimes within the United Kingdom, but very often overseas.
And Mr. Hyland, you mentioned that there were 151 convictions for slavery-related offenses last year. And if we're talking here about 13,000 potential victims of slavery, there's a big disconnect between the two numbers. Why is that?
And you're absolutely right about that. And that's one of the issues that I'm really focusing on as the Anti-Slavery Commissioner, is those numbers, that we start with a number of potentially 13,000 victims. The numbers that are known to the authorities in the United Kingdom come down to 2,700, and then the numbers that end up in prosecutions are less than 150. So I'm really concerned about that. And I think what it is there isn't the resources allocated to this, either nationally within the United Kingdom or internationally. This needs to be responded to as a crime where there's an issue of safeguarding, but it's organised criminality. and a very serious crime. So I need to make sure that the resources that are required are being focused on this, but then also when the victims are identified, that they are properly supported and that their accounts are recorded and those who commit these crimes are pursued and prosecuted, because at the moment that's not happening either in the United Kingdom or I don't think internationally. I think we should never blame the victims. This isn't down to the victims in any way, shape or form. They are victims and they need to be supported. I think that the response is in some ways not coordinated properly. I think there aren't enough resources on this. If we look at other crimes that are involve what are commodities, drugs and guns, there are a lot of resources placed into the investigations of these types of crimes. Well, in this crime, the commodity is a human being, a human life. So across the United Kingdom and internationally, there aren't the same level of resources allocated to investigate these crimes.
Fiona, watching that clip, you find Kevin Helland actually saying that in the UK, there are about 13,000 victims of human trafficking. Of 13,000, about 2,700 cases are known. In other words, at some point, some of these cases have been reported. But of 2,700 cases reported, there's only been about 151 convictions. Why is this?
I mean, the figures are staggering, and compared to the number of cases that have been reported and the number of victims, it just doesn't match up. Now, the report shows that the resources that the authorities have to combat this crime is not sufficient. And number two is, this is a highly organized crime. It's transnational, and the number of traffickers compared to the number of victims is more, because one trafficker could have thousands of victims under his ring or her ring, and so it's more difficult, and they operate under pseudonyms. So most times the victims don't even know the names, the real names of their traffickers, and it's
so
difficult.
it makes investigation pretty difficult.
Very difficult. So the authorities are really struggling here. I think that more needs to be done, because I mean, like, there's a real
more needs to be done
suffering.
In what sense? Like the government pumping more resources into helping to fight this kind of criminality?
Absolutely, because if the government is fighting an organized crime, they need to employ more tactics and strategies to combat this specifically. And I mean, it doesn't just deal with just one country. Almost all countries in the world are affected.
It's a world problem.
It's a worldwide problem.
It's a world problem.
Yeah.
Can you quickly talk to us about mediums that these syndicates use in luring people to, getting people to under their wings in the first place?
Now, they have different methods, and the most common one is deception. Now, these traffickers come to their victims and paint this picture. They paint this dream for the victims and give them a falsified hope that they're going to take them to a better life. And this is usually as a result of poverty. So these victims see this assumed hope, and then they get lured into it. Another means is through recruitment, through transportation. They take the victims from one country to the other. And the most appalling one is that in Cambodia, parents of children literally sell their children to the traffickers. Now, they have this thing called the virgin trade, where the parents of the child, usually young girls as young as the age of 14.
10,
yes,
14.
Yeah, and then they sell them to the traffickers, and it just continues like that. I mean, they live on as little as $1 a day, and they get paid for that transaction of $1,500.
This is a case of, I wouldn't term this as a case of poverty. It's all greed, because we're talking about your child here. You would rather give your child away for $1,500. I think that is horrendous.
Well, what the government needs to do is to provide more jobs, and more help needs to be done in, especially poorer countries.
We've got a short clip, to show you So you get a clearer picture of what we're talking about. This one is titled Modern Slavery. Let's watch this clip.
The victims of modern slavery can be a variety of people, anybody who find themselves entrapped in a situation where they're abused or exploited.
The majority of the cases have been people who've been trafficked from overseas across state borders into the UK, although there are a number of victims who are trafficked within the UK.
Let's not forget the Oxford and Rochdale cases, which involved British homegrown girls being trafficked within the United Kingdom for sexual exploitation.
The areas of modern slavery which are most prominent would be the labour, forced labour, certainly sexual exploitation, and domestic servitude as well. That's perhaps the most hidden.
Another type of way in which trafficked persons are used is that traffickers find vulnerable adults who may have dependencies or may have debts, and they traffic them for labour exploitation, which could involve the men being forced into work in fields or agricultural produce, so they'll be working extremely long hours in terrible conditions for little or no pay. The victims may think they're coming for a job or for a better life or an education or to be looked after by somebody, but they do think they're coming to do something different from when they arrive here, and when they arrive here it's a very different story.
I came from another country. I came from Sierra Leone. When we came to the UK, things changed. They promised that immediately we came to the UK I would start attending my college, but they never did all those things. My stepmom, she wanted me to doing all the work at home, cleaning, washing dishes, cooking, making food for the boys. She will not even give me a little bit of time on my own. Don't sit down, come and do this. She doesn't even want me to mingle with people, because even if somebody called me on the phone, I'm talking to someone on the phone, she will be passing around, up and down.
Modern slavery is very difficult to detect. It's a hidden crime in its nature. And victims, they don't have a label on saying, I'm a victim.
The victims of these activities will be quite fearful, and so it's unlikely that they will disclose to anybody what's happening.
Every day things just going worse. They are doing the same thing. So it was not really easy for me. They don't pay me any money. Since I was living with them, they never pulled even £5. I don't have money on my own. I said, but you have to allow me to do something on my own. You can't take me to the UK and try to destroy my future.
The tool that the traffickers will use is to threaten them is, if you speak to anyone, we'll hurt you, we'll hurt your family, or no one will believe you. Or they'll do control methods like taking away a person's identity documents. So if they're here illegally, that threat of them being found and being in trouble often will keep them quiet.
The thing that I would say to the public is that this could be happening anywhere, on the street where you live, in the community where you live. It's not something that's removed and remote from everyday life. People are being trafficked into all sorts of different sectors of the community.
Wow, knowing that the issue of human trafficking is one that's prevalent all around the world, that has prompted us to take this story today, because the issue of the refugees here in Europe is one that you can't ignore, because these refugees are, being caught as prey to human traffickers.
Yeah, I think this is a very vulnerable time for the refugees, and smugglers and traffickers are going to use this opportunity to exploit that. And if we rise to respond to that problem right now, we will prevent potential problems that could arise from this migrant crisis.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's the much that we can take. Thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right. Until same time next Thursday, it's goodbye from Fiona and I. Have a lovely weekend. Bye now.
Bye.